A couple of supervisors. If I could have your attention, please, I would like to welcome all of you to the November 24th meeting of the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors. Would you all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd like to start with the announcements this morning by welcoming our new interim CAO, Jeannie Boyce. Thank you for being here. Okay, and I have the following announcements to read to you regarding some closed sessions from last week. A closed session was held last Friday pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, Public Employee Performance Evaluation, Senior Project Manager, resulting in nothing to report. This was a closed session that we held over from the previous Tuesday. And then a closed session was held last Tuesday pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9b, paren 1. Conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation. One case, the claim of
supervisors. Together, the board and the Historical Society have embarked on this project to expand the Red Barn Museum. You may have seen the beginning of that project going on out by the Red Barn Road this past week. This is a project, of course, that is being done at no cost to the county of Calaveras. And it will result, when completed, in the expansion of the museum designed to preserve the heritage of our county. And in the long run will be the gift from this board and from the Historical Society to the citizens of Calaveras County for future generations to come. We are terribly grateful to all of you for your participation with us in giving this to the residents of Calaveras County. We'd like to fill you in, now that you've seen grounds being broken, on kind of where we stand. And to do that, another member of our board, Dwayne White, who is an engineer and has done some preliminary work in helping with the plans, would like to inform you about the progress. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Ladies and gentlemen, the Historical Society's Committee for the Red Barn received four bids from contractors, 3 of which were from the county, 1 out of the county, and thereupon selected the High Country Builders from that out of Mountain Ranch to construct the annex, what we call the annex to the building. That has progressed to the point where the suppliers of the building have promised the delivery of the building itself to the site on about December the 18th. They have already provided us with the foundation reactions that were necessary, and a local engineering office provided those designs, and the county building department has authorized procedure to commence on the foundation, which you see under progress now. The electrical conduit has been placed, and they're hoping to get authorization from Jeff White, building engineer, for progress toward Monday having the concrete poured for the foundation and the slab. We feel we're off to a really good start, and hopefully we'll get that slab in before a rain comes along and delays the progress. I think that's about the hope, the degree we've accomplished to the moment, and hopefully we'll see that building up there in good shape very early in the coming year.
Thank you, Dwayne. Anyone else wishing to address the board this morning?
If I might just conclude, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly.
As soon as the building is completed and the county approves the construction, we will, of course, turn it over to you. We hope, or turn it over to the county for use as the museum. We hope that at some point we've received wonderful donations for use at the building, mining equipment, blacksmithing equipment, and we're hoping to come to you in the future, and we wanted to alert you to it, to impose upon you to see if you would allocate for a period of time a small portion of additional land so that we could set those up outside. We don't have a firm plan for it yet. It would all be the part of the museum, but we're hoping that we can continue to work with you in the future to develop this into a real first-class part of this community facility. And thank you again for your attention this morning. We appreciate it. If you have any questions, better to ask them of Dwayne than me, but if you do, please do. Thank you.
I could, in my mind's eye, I see some of that old farming equipment being used on part of that land out there. Dennis's crew may have some more tenants up the hill that would be happy to do that. So produce some
produce. If you've got some kind of insight to where the gold's buried around here, we'd be happy to use all the equipment.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your efforts.
Good morning. My name's Bonnie Newman. I'm from Double Springs. I have two topics today. They're very similar, but they're quite different. One is, hi, Jeannie. Hello. This is going to be old stuff for you. One is an area of need, that a vacuum in Calaveras County that I encountered and have encountered it before. It's a follow-up from last time I was here. Remember I told you I got in a car wreck? Of course, Roger broke his arm. It's not easy. It was totally shattered because it was underneath the seatbelt. So we went to Lodi Memorial. Please follow up with an orthopedist. In 2 days, it needs to be set within 2 to 3 days. So immediately I call the orthopedist recommended, and of course they don't take Medi-Cal. So then I say, well, who can I get that will help me here? And they say, well, you go over to French Camp and you go to San Joaquin General. I go, oh, or Memorial or whatever they are. And I go, okay, and that's not going to work. Go to the local clinic. There's orthopedists in the county, but they don't accept Medi-Cal. But the clinic's going to do what they can. They're going to try and plead the case to get a local orthopedist to set this guy's broken arm. Okay, so we wait all day Thursday, we wait all day Friday. Finally I call and they say, well, they should be calling you. They didn't call. Okay, so now it's Saturday, now it's day 4. This guy has a shattered wrist. It's not a fracture, this is pulverized bone. Okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to UC Davis, sit in the emergency room for 13 hours, during which time my client has 2 breakdowns. They call the social workers in, put a lid on it. A couple hours later, they have to call security. My client has another breakdown. Only because they put him in a gurney was he seen within 13 hours of getting to the emergency room. We got home at 3 in the morning. What they did, they looked at him, they said, hey, that's a bad break. We're going to have to operate. You know, that you just can't. Well, after they did a lot of extensive background, this guy's paralyzed. He doesn't use this arm. So we don't really have to work with it. Let's put the plaster cast on, and then we can mold it into shape, and then we can send him home. And that's what they did. And that's how it's handled. And it actually molding that, no operation, just molding the bones back into place is how we're going to deal with it. And that's, I think, 60 miles away to get orthopedic care for somebody who's on Medi-Cal, not available in Calaveras County. French Camp, that's about 50 miles, or UC Davis, much preferable. Am my 5 minutes up?
No, you have almost 2 left.
Okay. Well, that's the end of that one. You're off the hook. Now I want to talk about another area of need, and it deals with mental health assistance. I have a client, because of his unusual condition, does not qualify for mental health services. Traumatic brain injury, even though the symptoms may be schizophrenia, hearing voices, talking to the walls, it's not considered a mental illness because the brain is damaged and it can't be repaired. So there's no way of any kind of recovery. This is what I understand. And therefore, I'm going to say mental health services, the state doesn't disclude services to my client, but it doesn't include services. The way the code is written, you have to fall within certain guidelines to receive services, and he doesn't because of traumatic brain injury. There's nothing to do with my poor client. What are we going to do with this guy? With a lot of
Okay, if not, would like to turn your attention to, this is item number 10. This will be a discussion and possible action regarding a minute order upholding the findings and recommendations of the Administrative Hearing Board in code compliance case number 0912 regarding Claude, I think that's pronounced Gouache, trustee, and this is brought to us by code compliance.
Good morning. Todd Barr with Code Compliance. In this particular case, initial contact was made in September of 2008. It was determined at that time that there were several structures on the property that had been converted to inhabitable space, and Mr. Gross was actually renting those structures out. At this point in time, following the administrative hearing, Mr. Gouache hired a contractor, converted these structures back to storage, and he's actually moved from the property and is renting the main house out. So
Michael Nemi and Michelle Nemi, claim number 09-31, resulting in the board unanimously voting to reject the claim. All right, I'd like to have us turn our attention to the consent agenda. As we've become familiar with this procedure, the items on the consent agenda are routine and mostly non-controversial. They'll be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion, but any member of the public or a member of the board can remove an item for individual discussion. So, asking for anyone who wishes to remove any item 1 through 8 this morning. Okay, hearing no requests.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes unanimously. We have this peculiar...
He is in compliance at this time.
So is any action required?
Just that we uphold the findings and recommendations, and this will be done. The fine will be reduced to zero in this particular case, as the agreement with his attorney.
So you just want a motion to remove it from the agenda then?
No, it will be a motion to
Just-
uphold the findings and recommendations, and I'll make that motion.
Yeah, just uphold, and then we can, this will, like I said, he is in compliance at this point.
Okay, and he will pay zero fine.
Zero fine, right.
Okay, that's fine. I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Todd. Okay, we have item number 11. This is a similar item. It's a discussion and possible action regarding a minute order upholding the findings and recommendations of the Administrative Hearing Board in Code Compliance Case number 09-16 regarding Eula Kolb et al. This is brought to us again by Code Compliance.
These are much the same circumstances, except this case started back in April of 2005. The property's been the subject of several different code violations over the years, but in this particular case, it was an instance of expired permits concerning a modular home and an addition on the property. Following the administrative hearing, Mrs. Kolb did reinstate the permit. We expect at this particular time that she is going to complete the project, and all fines will be reduced to zero in this particular case also. So we just need another motion to uphold findings and recommendations.
Todd, I have a question about this. It strikes me as being a little too... the board, by allowing this, the fines to be reduced to zero, it's almost like that we're forgiving the fact that you and your organization has been out there repeatedly since 2005. There should be some consequences to that in my mind. So,
I would agree with you in most cases, and we are recovering some administrative costs. In this particular case, I actually talked to Mrs. Kolb the other day, and she said that she would have liked it. It was a very pleasant conversation, too, for once. But she actually said that she would have liked to have been here, but she has been ill, and she asked that we did, in this particular case, reduce the fine to zero because of her financial situation at this point. Like I said, she would have liked to have been here, and if they go ahead and complete this project within the time, the current time of their permit, that's exactly what would happen if we uphold these findings and recommendations.
But the administrative, the $1,000 is still payable.
She'll pay some administrative costs, yes.
okay. Now, I'm willing to go along with your recommendation, but still, just to please hear me. Anybody in this whole area, if you mention Hub Court, they just roll their eyes. So let's if we have a chance to get it cleaned up and keep it cleaned up, let's do it. Okay. Yeah, sure.
I move we uphold the findings of the Administrative Hearing Board.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Tom. Okay, just tell her what I said. All right, we have arrived at agenda item number 12. This is a discussion and possible action regarding the approving and prioritizing the fiscal year 2010-11 overall work program projects submittals. This is brought to us by Public Works. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Honorable Chair, members of the board. Tom Garcia with the Department of Public Works here to bring forward a PowerPoint presentation There we go. What you have before you is the staff report for the county submittal for the overall work program to the COG. I have a list of projects in bullet forms so that you can make comments on them as needed. Real briefly, what we're trying to do here is establish a method by which the county identifies the priority projects within the county that we're seeking funding on. This goes with the county's overall work program, county's transportation element of the general plan, our CID program. It all fits together with the presentation that we did 2 weeks ago on the county's local roads needs assessment. The OWP is a critical portion of the funding for that. So what we're planning on doing is presenting this. That is a very odd. Can we straighten that out just a bit? Okay. While we're working on that, what we're going to be doing today is presenting this overall, or our submissions for the projects to be included in the overall work program. We'll be going back to the COG, to their Transportation Advisory Committee, to present the projects that the board has agreed to, has directed us to move forward on, and then we'll begin negotiations with the COG and the City of Angels on the funding that we would like to expend on those projects. Upon completion of the negotiations with the COG, we imagine that list will be amended. We're not going to get everything we asked for from the COG. We'll be back to the board to identify which projects have not been selected by the COG for funding and the projects that were selected for funding instead. So it will not be the last time we'll be before your board with a list of projects that we're trying to get money for. And we hope that this will stimulate some conversation between the county board and the COG, and also give direction to the COG representatives on what the board's wishes are at the COG meeting when they select the projects to be funded. And we should be close, right? Very close. Well, while we're waiting, we have
Testimony yesterday. Yeah, you just winged it.
If you go to the list of projects that are to be funded, and to the staff report, which identifies the funding sources, what we're looking for is the first priority for the county is State Route 1226 intersection improvements. That's our top priority. That's Public Works all these are recommendations from Public Works. That's the priority project for the county, is to get that one funded and completed. The second are bridge superstructure and substructure repairs. This ties in with week before the county needs assessment on local roads and bridges. There's a identified funding the annual funding needed to complete all the bridge projects is about $252,000. We know that that's not available. We're seeking additional funding from the OWP, and also looking to use these funds to leverage highway bridge program funds, statewide funds. The list of funds that we're looking for superstructure work and substructure repairs are on the list that I provided. They're also listed in the staff report. The third item is the scour and biological assessments. These are for bridges whose abutments and footings have shown or require some repair. Unfortunately, when we start working in the stream bed, we need to do a biological assessment. This funding will allow us to go in and do the biological assessment. So for this is $45,000. And the bridges listed. Did we lose our operator? The bridges listed are Cosgrove Creek, Hobbs Creek, and Jesus Marie Creek Bridge. The next segment, or next portion, The next priority project is the pavement management overlay projects. This ties in with the ARA funding that we're seeking. We've submitted several roads to the state for the stimulus package. It looks as if we'll be successful in getting those funds. This list might be modified slightly depending on which roads are included in the ARA funding and which are not. The issue is the federal, or to be eligible for ARA funding, you need to have a Category 7 or functional class 7, and many of our roads do not meet that functional class, as you can imagine. So ARA funds cannot be expended on these minor roads that desperately need some maintenance. So we'll be seeking additional funding through the OWP and other county funding sources to repair these roads. That list is in the staff report and on that handout. Let's see, where are we in the presentation? We are, management. Can you go back to the original slide? Maybe we can. Is there one before that? All right, there we go. Let's start at the next slide then. The sources of funding that are available to the COG that we're going to be seeking are CMAQ, RSTP, and
Pause whenever we get through the consent calendar so quickly. Our agenda says that we're not supposed to start public comments until 9:10, so we'll have another little interruption in our procedure. So anyway, we'll get going promptly at 9:10 again. Thank you. We can call the meeting back to order.
Given the better than 50-50. It works from here and it just takes
Maybe. All right. I would like to ask if anyone here would like to speak to the board about an item that is not on the agenda. This is public comments. I want to remind you that we're going to limit it to 5 minutes per person or 15 minutes per topic.
Jane McComber, Arnold, talking about the same thing we've been talking about the new animal shelter. I just had some new statistics about our animals killed in the shelter Friday. 3 more were done in this last week, so that's 204 dogs. 38% of the dogs who have come into the shelter have been euthanized. And the cats, 558, they had to do in 19.
clarify, RSTP is not actually RSTP funding, it's RSTP swap. Actual RSTP funding cannot be used for many of the projects that the CTC frowns on what we would be using real RSTP money on. This is a swap that's done through the COG and the state, so these are kind of washed funds. They're referred to as RSTP because that's the original source, but they're not RSTP funds. Next funding source is transportation enhancement, T funds, those are for bike ped projects. Local transportation funds, planning, programming, and monitoring funds. And there's other discretionary grant funds that the county is applying for as well. Next slide. And we have been through the first, 1226 intersection improvements. We've been through that. The bridge superstructure and substructure repairs also, we've discussed that. Bridge scour and biological assessment. Again, we need to do the biological assessment before we can go and do the repairs. Roadway rehabilitation, always our favorite. That's where we're seeking quite a bit of funding, and again, that's to complement the county's existing programs using ARA funds and other grant funding. Next slide. Mountain Ridge Road shoulder improvements, guardrail, and safety edge. This is the funding we're seeking on this one is going to leverage several pots of money. Highways for Life and Highway Safety Improvement Program. This is quite a large project, quite a lot of funding sources, and the money that we are seeking from COG will help leverage these funds to be spent on the road. Pavement management system update. The county is required to have a pavement management system plan in place and have that plan updated regularly in order to receive state funding. This is one of the updates to that plan. It's becoming more and more usable by both office and field staff. It helps us generate the reports that we gave in the last couple of meetings regarding our needs assessment. It tells us what's out there, what we need to do, and the condition of the bridges as well. It's a very useful tool. And again, it's also keeps us in compliance with the state and lets us get additional funding. Engineering and traffic surveys. This is one that's near and dear to our hearts. This is ties into the Mountain Ranch Road issue, where we have to establish the speed limits based on the 85th percentile, and on a 5-year rolling update, we have to go out and revisit each of these county road segments to make sure that the 85th percentile is what is posted. If changes are made, then we need to adjust the speed limits. And again, it's a mandate. Otherwise, the speed limits would be unenforceable by Highway Patrol and County Sheriff. Next slide. Pine Street West Point Bicycle Facility. This is also to leverage additional ARA funds. The project is outlined in the staff report. Construction of a bike path on Bald Mountain Road from State Route 26 to Crosswalk near West Point Elementary High School, or West Point Elementary School. Next project, another pedestrian facility from Michelson School Eastern Access to Scott Street. This is probably the largest allocation we're seeking. This one is problematic as it would be a multi-year source of funding. We'd be seeking T funds for several years to complete this project. The COG also has use for the T funding. They have several projects identified, and that's where we're going to get into the interesting conversations of what are the priorities in the county for these T projects, who establishes the priorities, and then who's the lead agency with construction, management, and maintenance of these facilities. The COG has identified several sources of funding, or several projects that they are seeking to fund with these projects. That is going to be discussed in the TAC, in the Transportation Advisory Committee. The ultimate say will be by the COG board, with our representatives hopefully representing the county's needs. But these will be ongoing negotiations. There are COG-sponsored projects for bike and ped trails on Cosgrove Creek, Angels Camp. There's the train rehabilitation. There's several projects. I'm missing my sheet of COG projects. There are several projects that the COG has identified for use of these funds. Again, the county also has priorities for uses of these funds, and it's going to be up to the county board and the COG board, or the council, to determine which of these projects should be county projects, which should be COG projects, which should be funded, and which should be taken off the table. And that's a discussion that I'm hoping that the board and the council will have, so that the staff can move forward on your recommendations. Go to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. The next on these are two rollover projects. One is the engineering traffic. I'm sorry. No. One of them is the circulation element update for the environmental impact assistance on the circulation element update. We have a consultant who's going to give specific guidance on the county's circulation plan to the consultant that's doing the environmental for the general plan. The consultant doing the environmental for the general plan is not necessarily a traffic specialist. We want to make sure that the circulation element of the general plan is very clear and airtight when it is rolled into the environmental document, so that everyone has a blueprint on how we move forward with the circulation element. The next item is the transportation funding outreach. That's another rollover item. That has to do with the county's RIM fees and a previous challenge to the RIM fees. We have to make progress on identifying the rest of the funding for the projects that are identified in the RIM. The RIM does not cover 100% of the construction costs for these projects. We have to find a way of determining how to fund the rest of them, and the transportation funding outreach is a way for the Public Works to go to the residents, tell them what the needs are, solicit ideas from them, find out what will fly and what won't as far as coming up with additional funding sources to fund all the remaining, the unfunded portion of the RIM fees. And I believe that concludes the list. Next slide. All things that we already know from 2 weeks ago. We have funding problems. The OWP is a key element in funding part of the shortfall. If we were to get, go to the next slide, please. If we were to get
the program, I've been an advocate for many years, both for the COG and the board, to allocate some money, particularly to the Michelson School overpass of Highway 4, because we're getting to have a higher and higher risk situation there for grammar school children on State Route 4. So I thank you for including this, but I do not see it included in the resolution, and I would like to have it mentioned in the resolution so it maintains its priority. There's two individuals, Beth Hirsch, that's working on that school, I would say pedestrian path and bicycle for the Michelson School. And there's also another individual that's significantly involved in the Feeney Park Foundation. And that
last week, because of the lack of a quarantine room, one cat came in and had upper respiratory, and so the whole room had to be euthanized. And so that's 70% of the cats that are brought in had to be euthanized. That's year to date, and you know, this is middle of November. I'm speaking to AAUW in January, our team is, and in that light, I went back to all the minutes of the Humane Society since their founding in 1978. And some of the things that I found ought to be interesting to you. What's sort of unhappy about the whole thing is that I could have written the minutes this right now, because we have made so little progress since 1978 regarding the animal shelter. The accomplishments in the first year was they applied for and were granted a charter as a nonprofit organization. And what was too bad was it took for so long, and that hampered the efforts in raising money, as these events had to be delayed until it was approved.
John Yost, and I've asked him to give both you and the COG a call because he has some bicycle routes that he would like to see if they can also receive some priority in future budgets. So I'd just like to thank you for starting by finally probably the most pedestrian community in the county, and the one we've worked on to make a pedestrian community is Murphy's, and this is the first time that we've even mentioned in any of the bicycle or pedestrian allocations, so thank you.
I would just caution that mentioning it in this plan doesn't guarantee its funding. What we're trying to seek is direction.
But at least we get mentioned, and hopefully we will move up the priority list. Because quite frankly, on the Pathways to School one, I suspect the Michelson one is the one that should have the highest priority and puts children at the greatest risk.
Supervisor Walensky, did you have a comment?
Yes, I did. Actually, a couple of them. I also wanted to thank you for including some things that might also fall into the long overdue category. Certainly the West Point bike path, which was put in 8 years ago, is welcome in this process, and I thank you for including it. Also, we've heard from many people in Mountain Ranch over the last year about particular sections of road and particular treatments of that. And the words that had been used in many public comments have included shoulder improvements, guardrail construction, safety edge, and rumble strip. Those things came up in various meetings over the course of the last, actually, 2 years, all of which are included in this. And I, again, applaud you for listening to the community and having a responsive proposal in front of us. I'm very enthusiastic about including that.
And if I can give all the credit to the staff on the preparation of this list, Jonathan Mitchell, Robert Packinger, and Jamie Asvin, who is here. Oh, no. They're in the audience to answer any questions on the project specifics, but they worked very hard to develop this list and identify the funding sources and then match the funding sources to the projects.
What I see on this is the connection between where the accidents are happening and where the treatment will be introduced, and that's very responsive. I hope we will find the COG and the county thinking alike on that one.
If I can add one other comment, the county has been delivering projects. We delivered $3.3 million in completed projects over the last 12 months. We have $24 million right now in active CIP projects. So the Public Works Department is really focused on getting the money out there, delivering the projects. I'm very proud of the staff, and I think that's what we're seeking from the board right now, is direction on, if you have a project sponsor, who is the project sponsor going to be, who's going to be constructing the projects, who's going to be requesting the funding. What we're trying not to do is to compete with the COG for funding of CIP projects. If the City of Angels is going to be constructing projects, if the county is going to be constructing projects, and the COG is going to be constructing projects, that's 3 organizations that are out competing for the same pot of money.
Surely we can coordinate in this small place without competing. Is there an impediment to that?
There is an impediment to that.
Well, could you please identify
Certainly,
that?
it's the priority of projects. Who develops the universe of projects that's going to be funded? We have the City Council in the City of Angels, and we have the County Board of Supervisors for the unincorporated area, and then we have the COG Board. The board develops my universe. We present the projects to you. You tell me what the priorities are and which ones you'd like to see in which years. You can amend this list as you see fit, reorganize it, and then I'm given my marching orders. Then I go to the COG and submit the list my universe, and my universe competes with the Angels, the City of Angels universe, and the COG board determines funding. If the COG is thrown in as also a project proponent, there's another universe out there of projects with priorities that have not been vetted through the county board or the City of Angels City Council. So what we're trying to do is determine what the universe of projects is and what that priority is. If it's the two agencies, City of Angels and the county, the unincorporated county, then we know what it is. If it's also the board, the COG, developing an additional project list, I have no idea where those projects that they come up with fall in relation to the priorities established by your board. And that's created some concerns. When we go back to the COG to negotiate these projects for the funding, we don't know, we don't have a basis to promote our projects without knowing the status of the projects that are being put forth by the COG. And we can only assume the projects being put forth by the COG were at the direction of the COG board, but we would hope that the projects that are being put forth by the COG board have been coordinated with both the city and the county.
I guess the follow-up question I would have is if today we're being asked to support this as our priorities. This is a recommendation, and it looks like a good balance and a good prioritization of what we've been talking about over these years. However, I'm not clear on where the city is on these things, and I certainly have nothing in front of me from the COG. I don't know if there's where the overlap is or where the differences or nuanced priorities might be in either of the two other agencies we're dealing with. Can you convey any of that to us? Are there specifics that are in dispute?
There are specifics in dispute. One of them is the T funding. And again, the COG has gone through a process where they have allocated all of the T funding for other projects. And that would make it improbable that we'd be able to do the Michelson School.
Well, I'll give you my 2 cents worth. I think the COG is primary duty is to deliver services to the city and county, which are the two organizations that form the COG. And I think the city should set the priorities for within the city limits, and the county should set the priorities for the unincorporated area. I think once the projects are established, if the COG is able to obtain funding or additional funding, that's wonderful, but I think the county should be the Public Works Department in Calaveras County should be the primary agency for delivering those projects on site. And frankly, I think the city should be the primary agency for doing and delivering the projects within the city limits. Otherwise, we're just going to have constant duplication, constant conflicts, and it just goes on and on. And obviously, if the conflicts get to be too great, this board, as does the city council, always has the ability to restructure the COG, and particularly the COG board. And that's always hopefully we don't get to that point, but that is since it is basically a joint venture, either party can change the terms of that joint venture to a significant extent.
We currently have a very good working relationship with the COG. Director McSorley and I speak quite often, and we make sure that there are no surprises. So we met this morning before the meeting and went over what I was going to be presenting to the board. And in addition, the COG board has directed COG staff to revisit the JPA agreement that formed them and try to address some of these issues on the roles and responsibilities of each of the agencies, each of the jurisdictions. I think what staff is looking for is clear direction, clear and consistent direction from both the county board and the COG council. That if if there are priorities established, that those are conveyed to the COG board or the council. And then those are, again, the direction that is given to both COG staff, county staff, and city staff. We're looking for unanimity here. We don't want to drive a wedge anywhere. We just want to make sure that everyone is aware of the projects that are out there, the limited sources of funding, and that the priorities are established, agreed upon, and that's how we move forward. Of course, there will be conflicts when we start negotiating because there's always a limited source of money and too many projects to do. But if the board and the COG council are behind staff and give us direction, then we can make this work.
Okay.
Do you have a comment, Gary?
Well, I did, but I think I had a couple questions that they were answered. I do have a question, though. I see Pettinger Road on here, and I've been an advocate for doing something with Pettinger Road since I took office. That road actually is a commuter road that's used by 2 districts to go from one state route 26 to 12. And I see in here you have it down, the 4 roads listed as either Class 8 or Class 9 roads. What class is that road? Is it an 8 or a 9? And what's the distinction between going from an 8 to a 9? It's like a Richter scale. It's 10 points.
At that point, they had more than 250 members and more than $5,000 in the bank. And this is 1978. We have stopped the selling of animals for experimental purposes and are making every effort toward a more humane method of destroying them. The sheriff's office, this is parenthetical, the sheriff's office later reinstated the animals dealer. And the animals dealer out of Stockton, many of you might know, was still going on until like 1988. So, we finally got rid of that. A spay-neuter certificate program was developed and put into effect. And we have drawn plans which call for the installation of a heating system, new lighting, outdoor runs with drains, a washroom and hot water in the storage room. The conditions prior to that were very primitive. They were very primitive, actually, until about 2 years ago. In January 1978, again, membership was 250. January 1979, we continue to work on pound improvements, and that's what it was called then, of course, but it's a very slow process. We get promises which are then postponed or canceled. The Board of Supervisors has allocated $22,000 for a heating system, hot water, an office for the pound master, a washroom system.
Less than an 8 and so forth.
Well, currently Pettinger Road is
units, etc. In March of 1979, 6 humane officers investigate and make arrests of persons guilty of animal abuse. 18 cases in last 6 months of animals injured or in distress, 9 cases of neglect, and no arrests. Since the inception of our spay-neuter program, giving out certificates of $15 for dogs and $10 for cats, 125 female dogs and 170 female cats and 32 male cats at a cost of over $2,000. The Board of Supervisors has approved improvements, and they're nearly complete, including covered runs. At that point, they were still using carbon monoxide to put down animals.
Gene, if I could interrupt you
Yes.
for just 1 second. You have 29 years to go, and you have a 1 minute left.
Okay, well, I'm not going the whole 29 years. In November of '79, untenable conditions at the pound, holes in fencing, jagged edges around the feed bins which are injuring animals. We'll try to hasten these repairs with the offer of volunteer labor. In January 1980, we're moving on, met with the Board of Supervisors to build several small shelters constructed in various communities with the Humane Society to be given authority to collect fees, licensing, and impound costs to give financial support for the shelters. July 1982, we relentlessly keep after our supervisors, but compassion is not a quality and abundance in the group. They make promises and even vote for it and then renege. After purchasing the euthanasia unit, the county spent the $20,000 that was budgeted for the room to house it for office remodeling and painting. They said there were higher priorities, quote. In the meantime, the animals were still being sold to the animal dealer for experimentation, and the lucky ones were being clubbed or shot. There are 58 counties in Calaveras, and in 1982, only 14 were still selling to animal dealers. Sad to say, we live in one of the most backward counties in the state. Granted, there have been some baby steps forward in the last 27 years. The Calaveras Humane Society is giving you an incredible opportunity to make great strides into the 21st century, to give our animals a fair chance at their right to life. Take that forward step and give them a fair chance. Thank you.
I'll be brief. I'd like to introduce the president of the Humane Society Board. I think you all know Blair Wiley, who's always at our side. And I'd like to welcome Jeannie Boyce to the fray. In July, the resolution passed by the County's Advisory Committee, DAAC, and the Humane Society Board was passed by both boards. August of 19th, we had a meeting with Supervisor Callaway, the County Council, Jim Jones, and Bob Lawton to tweak the resolution. Ownership of the property and leasing the property were the two items we were discussing, and we ultimately agreed that a lease would probably be just fine. At that time, they were talking about 3 years to allocate a piece of property, and I think we winnowed that down to 1 year. November 10th, you had a letter of agreement in concept with what we're trying to do. We took that back to both boards, and both boards said, where's the resolution? So we have met with Supervisor Callaway again to schedule a resolution for the 15th of December. We're hoping you're going to address that issue then. It's the last meeting of the year. We need to get fundraising. And so we're here to ask that you please keep that on the agenda so that we can start our fundraising in a big way. You've heard the horrible history of this county in dealing with its animals. It's time to put that behind us, join together, build a shelter, deal with our animals in a decent, loving, protective environment. The time for delays and procrastination is over. Thank you.
Before you step away, most of us know you, but for the record, could you state your name?
Karen Elliott from Arnold.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Yes, Mr. Studley, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Supervisors. I'm David Studley from Mountain Ranch. I'm here today as a member of the board of the Calaveras County Historical Society. As we approach the uniquely American holiday, it's appropriate for many of us to pause and give thanks for the blessings that we've had over the past year, both large and small. And the Historical Society is very gratified at the favors that have been shown to us.
It's listed as a Class 9.
As a Class 9?
Correct.
Which means the
Jonathan?
template of it is,
You aren't going to get to sit
Like
down.
almost a residential road.
it's a very narrow road that's been patched, I think, for the last 50 years without an overlay. What's the difference between an 8 and 9 and a 7 and an 8?
Well, actually, these are FHWA functional classifications. And so the challenge there is clearly the Federal Highway Administration doesn't have the same familiarity with our transportation infrastructure as we do. So they certainly wouldn't be understanding of the fact that it's used as a cut-through route between two state highways. So in this case, typically what happens is the FHWA looks at overall maps and uses broad-based engineering assumptions to assign functional classifications. One of those assumptions is if a road connects two state routes completely. In other words, if Pettinger Road were to connect from State Route 12 all the way through to State Route 26, the FHWA would have by default assigned a functional class 7 to that road. In this case, we know that we would typically use all of Orchard and from there
Southward to Pettinger, correct?
And so that would be something that would get past those broad-based engineering assumptions. And so from there, what we have several options in front of us. First of all, if it's functional class 8 or 9, then we are automatically excluded from using federal funds for the repair of that given route. So from there, we can then appeal to FHWA which we have done historically.
At least some guidance on the priorities that the board would like to establish.
I think in fairness to this board, we would need, I mean, I don't have a problem supporting this as submitted, but in terms of then starting to negotiate, and let's just use the transportation enhancement, this board then needs to see what the COG is looking at, and we go to the COG council with what we think should be the priorities for transportation enhancement funds. I mean, that could hold for some of the others too. So this board needs to know what they are.
We can provide that information, or the COG can provide that information. We do have that available. We have the information on the projects that have been obligated through Caltrans and are no longer available for the funding we're seeking. We have the projects that have not yet been identified, or not yet been obligated.
I have one more item. Again, I did talk to Mr. Garcia about that. It's the Transportation Funding Strategy Outreach.
Indeed.
And did you get a chance?
I did not get a chance to talk
Okay.
to Janice.
I'll tell my colleagues what my concern is. We are requesting $60,000 in funding to do a community outreach so we can go out and possibly get a bond measure, a tax measure, a parcel fee, a sales tax or something to pay for the other half of road impact mitigations. All of us attended community meetings recently. We are also probably going to be pursuing an increase in parcel fee for solid waste. I had a problem spending or requesting $60,000 for something that we know is dead in its tracks. And I explain that, and I also understand what council has been telling us. If we don't do something to pursue the other nexus of the road impact fee, at some point we might have to hand that road impact fee money back. I would just as soon take the $60,000 and fix Pettinger or Mountain Ranch or something else. Mr. Garcia can correct me, but I thought he was going to he will talk to county council's office about what is the minimal we have to do. That was the one that gave me the most heartburn. I understand it, and I understand what the county needs to do. I just would like to find another option.
Any comments about that comment?
The county was successful in the challenge to the RIM fees, but that hasn't gotten us out of the woods yet. We have not identified the other portion of funding to complete these projects. And I do need to work with the county council's office to find out what we need to do, how far we need to proceed in identifying the rest of the funding. We do need to identify the rest of the funding in order to have a viable RIM program. But whether or not this is the best use of that funding, this is how we were addressing the concerns that we had not yet established a new funding source for it. And quite frankly, I don't know what a new funding source would be in this economy with the constraints in Calaveras County. Whether or not it's public outreach to find out what the public can bear, letting them know what our needs are. I think everyone knows what our needs are, but having them actually vote for something that they would pay for to address those needs, that's probably a very long-term project with a solution that's going to lie many, many years from now when the economy improves and people are feeling better about spending money on infrastructure again. Again, I'll work with council to find out what our obligations are in the short term, so this may or may not be on the list of items that we can negotiate with the COG.
Tom, I had that underlined also, and earlier we had a presentation by some consultant that was retained. We all walked out saying that just wasn't even closely viable. What I don't want to do is spend $60,000 on another consultant that is going absolutely nowhere, because you're not going to get a tax passed in this environment, nor is it a good idea to pass a sales tax increase or something, quite frankly, in this environment. I don't mind leaving it in there as a placeholder, but I think we need to work with county council to make the RIN fee as defensible as possible. But if you're going to go out to if we're going to go out to the citizens for an increase in a tax or something, we're just going to be wasting our money at this point. I mean, we have the solid waste fee coming, and that's, is to me critically important, and that's we're going to start closing down transfer stations. Work with county council, but as far as getting a match on that from the citizens at this point in time, I don't think there's much possibility there. So I don't want to just spend it on a consultant just to come back like we did before, and we all just said, boy, we don't need to discuss that further.
I think I've heard the direction loud and clear.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to chime in on this as well. I don't want to wind up in another 17-year, let's hope it goes away, and wind up nailed to the wall again on this. I think we have to get a real clear picture, and I agree that it's important to get the legal context set so that we know exactly where our obligations lie. I also think it's important that we have a clear picture of what the public wishes, both in terms of priorities and projects and the kinds of things that would meet the needs that people perceive, but also to take a look at the different mechanisms to pay for it and find out where the tolerance is. I agree with the comments that this is a real sorry time to be having this late discussion in the middle of the worst recession of our lifetime. But I also think that the timing has a lot to do with what we haven't done to date, and that digging a bigger hole for ourselves may not actually help the next generation. So somehow we've got to sort this through, and again, a clear picture of our legal obligations would be a nice place to start.
I want to jump in on that thing too, Supervisor Walensky. Mr. Garcia, if my memory serves me correctly, the improvements, the proposed RIM improvements, the price tag for improving Pool Station Road is $30 million or thereabouts?
I'm not familiar. I don't have that committee.
Okay. Well, I think that it's interesting that it is one of the principal projects that this previous boards have approved as being on their priority list to improve. When the consultant went around and conducted the community meetings to sort of test the temperature of people's willingness to tax themselves for doing their fair share of the unfunded road improvements that developers would not be funding. Particularly, I think that this was universal around the county, but there wasn't one project that benefited pipe, and so that people look at that list and they see, okay, well, $30 million for Pool Station Road, you have nothing listed on Pool Station Road here, so my conclusion would be that it's not a very high priority. Let's get rid of it. So that would what that would do would be to bring down the threshold or the tax consequence of approving a tax measure for funding the unfunded portion of the RIM improvements. So, I mean, if you took that $30 million out, which I would submit to you that when you've got the ownership of the lands along Pool Station Road, we had the room filled with people that lived along that road. They don't want it improved. They want it to be exactly like it is, so that's going to be an uphill battle, spending money to improve that road. If we were to take $30 million out of the RIM and say, well, yeah, that will give us an opportunity to spend something down in your neighborhood, that will go a long ways toward softening the resistance. The other thing that I'd like to ask you is this, the thing that jumped off the page here in this report was the scouring, this scouring under 3 bridges. Now, to me, I mean, I'm visualizing this term, scouring. You've got a bridge the support for the bridge is being undermined by the water that passes by. $45,000 to find out if there are any bugs or bunnies living in that scoured-out area is offensive to me. I mean, that's very close to the amount of money that I make in a year. And I have to recoil by that figure. Did that go out for any kind of a bid process? If so, I mean, how far are we going to go? 2 miles up the stream and 2 miles down the stream? It's baffling to me that what we've
for some RR roads, and the other option is we simply look for local funds to complete this work. And in this case, OWP is actually a primary source of local transportation revenue that we can pursue for roads in this instance. So,
Would it help to conduct a traffic study on that section of road in our appeals to the highway?
Not necessarily a traffic study, but, and I have to credit staff, they were actually able to have FHWA reclassify several of the roads in the county as part of our RS submittal, which is unheard of. So there's been some success. What we can do is work with FHWA staff and show them that it is an actual cut-through to 2 state routes, and it is a link to the cut-through rather than being the single road. We might have some success there and be able to use RF funding. But again, what we're looking for without having to reclassify the road is a different source of funding, non-federal source of funding.
Put ourselves into in this environmental analysis game. If the support underneath the bridge is being detrimentally affected by the water passing by, let's limit the environmental assessment to 2 feet passed up and down and get it done for $4,000. I don't understand that. Can you respond?
The county has been identified as having 2 endangered species, red-legged frog and tiger salamander, and unfortunately, because of that, we are required to do these biological assessments for any work within the stream bed. It's Fish and Wildlife, Corps of Engineers, require us to do these studies in order for us to do the construction work within the channel. Regardless of what we believe is the actual impact, we are required to do a study to make sure that their concerns are satisfied before we can move forward on construction.
Cosgrove Creek Corps of Engineers right now and the county both are involved in that study, a red-legged frog study, and I'm sure that those documents can be used for that particular Hogan Dam Road Bridge.
The timing of the Cosgrove Creek study might lend itself to our ability to get in the channel and do this. I'm not sure if that...
I think the first part of that study has been completed.
It's already been done.
Can you address that?
Well, just answer my question. Did it go out for competitive bid? Or is that just a plug figure, $45,000 for the biological assessment?
What we did on this is Fish and Wildlife has a specific scope of work that they require in order to clear us to do work inside the channel for a bridge, especially concerning scour work. So we took the Fish and Wildlife scope so that we wouldn't have to prepare a scope that would eventually, that would cause us to miss an item that's required before we can enter the channel. So we took that scope of work from Fish and Wildlife and gave it to 3 independent consultants that we felt would give us reasonable rates on biological assessment work. It was based on the estimates that we received from those 3 consultants that we presented a $15,000 figure to today.
$15,000 per bridge.
It just went up. So you brought it up and now it's gone up.
No.
Now, regarding
3 locations.
Also, Supervisor Thomas, just one item that you mentioned as far as Pool Station Road. We have a $3.5 million project that we have begun work on for Pool Station Road, and we're funding that with local funds, identified also RIM funds for that road improvement project, which, as you mentioned, is one of the primary projects identified in the RIM based on the RIM match. In other words, that road was identified by those consultants as one of the roads most impacted by increasing development. And so as a function of that, we've also applied for Highway Safety Improvement Program funds, and would anticipate that next year's OWP would include match dollars requested for that project. However, since we're still pending application approval on the HSIP, it wasn't appropriate at this time to include that project.
Put it on? Okay, thank you for that. But Jonathan, before you step away, if you have any recollection about those fish and game requirements, I mean, how many feet or miles up and down the stream do we have to look for frogs?
It's feet, and I actually don't know, but I'd be certainly happy to review that scope of work that we received from Fish and Game, Fish and Wildlife with you, if you'd like to, and the specific nature of that request.
And as far as tying into the existing work going on in Cosgrove Creek?
This is something that we were aware of as a function of the Cosgrove Creek meetings, and as you know, one of the items that have been discussed regarding the Cosgrove Creek meetings is there indeed a presence of some of the protected species in that area? And so what we had talked about at that time was, by moving forward with this specific biological assessment, we could establish whether or not there indeed is red-legged frogs in the vicinity of the bridge on Hogan Dam Road. And because that does span Cosgrove Creek, it could begin establishing somewhat of a precedence, if you will, for the type of protected species that may be populating the majority or remainder of the creek. In other words, as you remember, there has been some assumptions from Army Corps and from other agencies, broad-based, on what could be populating that creek. And if we were to, as a function of this $15,000 assessment, discover that there's no red-legged frogs there in that area, then we have the foundation for we have a foundation to look at whether or not there is indeed any of those protected species in the remainder of the creek.
To question the assertions that were made by Fish and Wildlife.
Well, those studies have to be conducted at certain periods of time during the year. And the first leg of the course was already done during the dry periods this year. It was done during August. They now have to wait till the wet season, sometime in February, March, to conduct the second phase. So if you use the Fish and Wildlife guidelines that you said, you're going to have to conduct those studies at 2 different times of the year. If you haven't started them yet, then you have to go through the wet season and then through the dry season. That's why I was pointing out that we could possibly use the document in the time frame that the Corps will have on Cosgrove and maybe save 15,000 or so. I mean, it's very feasible to do that. We're paying for it.
Well, gentlemen,
These are 1011 funds. Jonathan just mentioned that if the Corps does have their study complete, then we won't.
I'll get you some more information on it. Okay?
Oh, that'd be great. Okay. Thank you.
the heartburn that I want to express is that the very term scour gives a connotation of this this barren landscape. It doesn't. It's not. There isn't a great proliferation of flora and fauna there because it's been washed away.
Now,
So,
I think of scour as rubbing a pot.
well, but the force of the water is scouring underneath the foundation of the bridge. So, whatever vegetation was there, whatever plants were there, are gone. So, to kind of grasp at straws to think that, oh my God, if we don't find any frogs under the bridge, it's going to prove something. That's to me is kind of flawed logic. But let's get the bridge fixed the most expeditious and timely way. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other Anybody else want to beat up on our staff? Sorry.
Mr. Chair, I would move the board approve.
There may be some comments from the audience on this.
You want to open it to the audience first? Okay.
Anyone wishing to comment on this item?
I have just one comment, Mr. Chairman. I was shocked, perhaps the board was shocked as well, to hear that it's the opinion of our staff that federal mapping activities in Calaveras County are inaccurate, and that the federal government is ignorant, more ignorant than our own citizens, of what's going on in this county, and that federal actions have led to charges to this county or burdens on its citizens that its own citizens could better protect. And I think all of us ought to bear that in mind when considering federal mapping activities in our area.
Were you making?
Thank you.
Were you making reference to the Pettinger comments?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Thomas.
Anyone else wishing to comment? Morning, Mr. Meyer.
Guy Myers, Valley Springs. You have a new planning director. He's probably not up with a lot of the history. But one of the other things that is frustrating that I've seen through the years is a lot of people under CEQA just takes portions out of CEQAs and doesn't address those portions in CEQA when we're talking about CEQAs and projects. I came in the middle of this. I assume that the project is addressing what to do about the bridge on Hogan Dam Road. Is that correct?
The foundation is...
Okay. We happen to own both sides of the property on that, at least for a little while longer.
Should be your job to fix the bridge then.
That's right. Started that process, and one of the things we did is we went out there and looked for a lot of little creatures. We looked for the fairy shrimp, and we decided that, you know what, looking for the fairy shrimp for 3 years, our consultant said it's better just to think they're there and set aside some habitat and spend about $50,000 an acre to recreate that than to look for them forever. Okay, so in our project that basically turned into an environmental impact report on a PD zoning application, we searched for those creatures, and the first thing the consultant said was, geez, we went out there and number one, the 3 creatures have never been in this area as identified by Fish and Wildlife's maps. So this idea that they're somewhere in Calaveras County, therefore they are right at this site. So our consultant wrote back to Fish and Game, and they said, yeah, but, you know, we don't really know. Maybe some of them got there somehow, even though they've never been found there. So we paid our consultant to go out there and search around to see if you could find any type of evidence that they were there. Make a long story short, about 4 different times Fish and Game went back, and I think the last time it was looking for all those species, but the last most ridiculous thing was you had to get a map, you had to get a permit to go out there under the second full moon at night.
Yes, John.
How about a toll road, Gary?
It may end up being a toll.
I can just add on this particular OWP item. As far as OWP funds are concerned, we're only requesting 25% of the total cost for these road rehabilitation projects. So Pettinger Road is quite a significant project in and of itself.
I understand that. It needs some easement and widening and drainage, and it has many problems other than just a simple overlay.
It makes it an outstanding candidate for the pursuit of these revenues, using them as leverage to be able to complete a project of that magnitude with only a 25% input from OWP.
One of the other challenges in using OWP funds is some of the funds are used for the day-to-day operations of the COG. They have part of their projects, such as Wagon Trail. They keep a reserve.
We're alluding to skim the top of the waters. So we paid for that. We would be happy to tell our consultant to give you a copy of the map if nobody over at the Public Works Department is able to go over to the Planning Department and get a copy. I mean, and I really came here just to sit in the audience, and some of this stuff, it's just, I'm sitting back here, you're asking some of the same questions, so are you, Gary, and why are we doing this over and over again? And the reason we're doing this over and over again, and the reason that our taxpayer money is doing it over and the developer's money is doing it over, is because we haven't built a database we're supposed to do under CEQA, and instead of having everybody, including ourselves, the county, redo this stuff over and over again. And if you go to CCWD, they'd probably be happy to give you a copy of their environmental documents, which I believe, and I don't want to speak for CCWD, I've looked at them briefly, they have the ability to do this. So somehow it would cost all of us as taxpayers and make your guys' job a lot easier if we could start building a database so that when you have a project and all you guys are sitting up there and scratching your heads and saying, well, maybe this was done before, and you got new planning directors, new public works directors that don't have the history themselves of knowing at it, but understand the environmental laws and understand that, hey, you have to comply with those. But they've already been complied with by other government agencies in Calaveras County, other individuals in Calaveras County, and it seems to me we could save the taxpayers money by using some of that stuff as alluded to.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. I'd forgotten that your project required that same analysis of that same area of the creek, so that would be appropriate. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else wishing to make a comment on this item? If not, the chair entertains a motion.
And Mr. Chair, I'd move that the board approve and prioritize the fiscal year 2010-2011 overall work program project submittals as submitted by Public Works here this morning.
I'll second that.
Tom, didn't you want to amend it to include?
Oh, excuse me, I did want to amend the resolution to include the Murphy's project in the resolution, so it maintains a priority. So I would amend it as amended.
Second holds.
Okay, we have a motion, an amended motion, and a second. Before I ask for the question, Mr. Garcia, did you have a comment?
Tom has an issue with the wording.
Looks like he's sitting down.
Okay, apparently not.
Okay.
I think we're home free. No.
I apologize. We seem to have two versions of the staff report. Some staff have item 9 included with your project, with the school project. And the staff report that has actually been circulated to the board does not have item 9. I apologize for that.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
So it was intended in the first
intended to be
place,
included.
and this is just to correct a clerical error.
So you want
Thank
the
you.
motion to include the resolution we don't have before us?
No, I will accept the resolution as amended by the board. Thank you.
That's fine.
All right.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously.
Thanks, Tom.
All right, that has taken care of item 12. Anybody wishing to take a little break before we go on?
Take 5 minutes, please.
Okay, 5-minute break, and then we'll take up item 13. All right, calling the meeting back to order again, we are down to item number 13. And this is a discussion and possible action regarding the resolution approving the purchase of the REMS/CAD software and CopLogic online reporting system software for the Calaveras County Sheriff's Department. And looks like Captain Hawkins is here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Items 13 and 14 in front of you are combined while they're independently agendized. So what I've done is provided you an outline And I thought if you could bear with me and let me take you through the outline and explain what the project is, and then you'll see how that relates to both agenda items. So first, the project is the development of a first stage of a microwave system that will link radio towers to provide better interoperability for deputies in the field, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. This has been the result of about 5 years of work coming here today. It's involved the California Emergency Management Agency, the U.S. Department of Justice, a whole slew of police and sheriff's offices in California, and interestingly, the help of congressional staff, including Congressman Lundgren and Senator Feinstein, who've been gracious enough to provide us funding. And I'll talk a little bit about funding in a minute. So this is a long-term project that started out as a conceptual paper that said, how can we deliver new technology to the sheriff's office, certainly in light of the economy that we're looking at long-term, to boost our productivity, long-term reduce cost. And the trick to do that without any net general fund costs, well, that's a pretty daunting task, and that's what we've been working on the last couple of years. What will the system do? Essentially, it'll allow deputies to query through an onboard computer, DMV, and warrant records. It'll also allow the deputies to retrieve dispatch messages real time, much like you see on cops on TV, where there's screens in the car and they're getting information on warrants, or they're getting in-progress information on calls as they're going to calls. It'll also provide real-time status between the dispatch center and the field units. It'll support paperless reporting. It'll provide GIS locating capabilities. For example, you're going down the road and you want to know where an address is. Deputies could type in, similar to a TomTom, find address information, where they are, where they're going, as well as an emergency signal if you haven't heard from the deputy for some period of time. And then lastly, it provides a community reporting internet link that will allow the community to actually report crimes, misdemeanor crimes, and any other information through a web link. That latter portion was the result and one of the key findings in the Sheriff's Office staffing and strategic study over the last couple of years. So it blends not only in-field wireless capabilities for the deputies, but it also links the community reporting into a greater reporting model, if you will. What are the elements? Essentially, the project will involve installing microwave infrastructure on 3 existing towers. It'll install mobile data terminals in 26 patrol cars, and it'll provide deputies the capability to begin paperless reporting on software from their cars so they can input a report, upload it to the server, store it, retrieve it, download it back to a car, and change reports. That'll pay huge benefits just for data management, retrieval, and storage alone. And then lastly, the project will be constructed with no net general fund costs. So what are the benefits? We'll improve communications interoperability hugely. This will put us into the 21st century clearly to provide greater information from the dispatch
It'd be like just, goes on a law enforcement search engine of something versus to dispatch who...
Good question.
Who does it and then reports back?
It starts at the dispatch center. and the dispatch center is receiving a query from the terminal that'll come through the microwave to the tower to the dispatch center. And it gets encrypted and de-encrypted in that process, so the information is protected. And then it goes to Sacramento to the Department of Justice, where the information is retrieved, back to the dispatch center, and then back through that funnel to the car.
But not back to a person, it goes back
To a
through
terminal.
a terminal. Okay.
Server.
Any other project, or any
But
questions so far?
the terminal is in
In the
the
car.
car.
Dispatch
Yeah,
Correct.
Remotely.
In fact, they're fixed mount screens, portable keyboards, and a fixed CPU that's in the trunk in a little locking cage to provide air movement so they don't overheat,
Is there-
based on a spec from the San Joaquin Valley.
Is there any possibility that this will result in one of your officers getting 150 miles away from the county without realizing
In
it?
order to pay the invoices, because everything they do is on reimbursement. So our request would deplete that reserve. We can work with COG staff and how to address the timing on the use of those funds so they are made available for projects rather than being held in a reserve in a rolling cash account so that they can pay the invoices for their contractor doing some of their projects. But again, those are details that we hope to work out with the COG staff to make these funds available for actual construction projects.
I think Supervisor Callaway also had a question.
I told Mr. Garcia yesterday when I spoke to him about this agenda item that supervisors kill for road money. So
What?
we kill for road money. I mean, all of us. I mean, that's sacrosanct to all of us. I do want to say, being on the, representing this board on the COG board, the county has by default allowed things to occur over the years. And I remember...
I don't know.
Like that U.S. Airlines?
Yeah, got to pay attention.
Okay, all right.
Project organization. There's two essential projects in this project. Project number one is the purchase of operating software, of which there's three. The RIMS CAD, which is the operating platform that runs the information that moves the data from the dispatch center to the field. The second is what's called CopLogic, and that's providing the paperless reporting for the deputies on the screen, on the keyboard to the server. And CopLogic also supports the community field-based reporting through an internet web link. And then the last piece is ESRI. Howard, on agenda item 15 behind me, will talk about ERSI and the site license. ERSI is the GIS reporting piece that will provide real-time instructions to the deputies. It will also help us do geographic information system in terms of crime reporting visually. And it will also support identifying patrol cars. Sacramento is a good example. When the deputy was killed a couple of years ago, they found him through a GPS, a GIS locator in the car on a similar system that we're implementing. Project 2, we'll call that the hardware. And at this point, what I'm bringing to you is Task 1 and Task 2 for today's agenda. Task 1 will be the infrastructure put in the 26 patrol cars and the 3 towers for the MDT. And then Task 2 will be the actual build-out of the 26 cars. Total project time, 6 to 9 months. Once the project is awarded this morning, we'll have a project schedule within 2 weeks. County Council was gracious enough to prepare a contract for me that will performance bond the entire project cost for number 1 and number 2.
Clay,
Yes.
the way you said phase 1 and phase 2 sounded like there's additional phases. Are there additional
Correct.
phases, and what might they be?
You'll see Task 3 and Task 4. Task 3 will actually install microwave dishes on the tower, and then Task 4 will be the construction of an 18-inch wide, 30-foot high microwave monopole at the Calaveras Airport.
And when will those projects come before the board, those phases?
Probably late winter, early spring.
And they will be grant funded also?
All grant funded. But what we decided to do was to break this up into small, manageable projects. We could come to the board, explain the project, show the financing, complete the project, and then come back and then sequentially go through those.
So there's project
tasks.
3 and 4, and that will, phase 3 and 4, and that will then complete
And
the
that will
phases?
then complete, correct.
Thank you.
Correct. So we're only talking about tasks 1 and 2.
But you talked about task 1 and 2 taking 9 months or so? Is that what you
The entire project should be 6 to 9 months.
Okay, but I'm sure that the answer to this is pretty obvious, but we're not going to have 26 patrol cars running around with this equipment without having the towers up to make it work. It's all going to...
No, part of the project schedule will be to marry those timelines together so that we're kind of going down the road so that we can quickly use the information and use the hardware.
Good.
And that will follow the award today. We'll then work with the installation contractor to develop a schedule within 2 weeks.
Okay, any other questions about this?
On the tower, I mean, I know we spoke, and I think I was a bit confused. There's 2 existing towers?
2 existing and 1 to be constructed at
And
the
1
airport.
to be constructed,
Correct.
and that was at the airport?
At the
Okay,
airport, a
got it.
mono
Thank
pool.
you. All right, thank you.
As a former pilot, I'm visualizing how problematic it might be to have some structure sticking up at or near the airport.
Good question. The pole height will be the height of the existing barns,
Okay.
airport structures at the airport, 30
Okay.
feet within FAA regulations.
Great.
Project costs. Task 1 and 2 of Project 1 is about $552,000. We released an RFP late summer that a consultant had prepared for us to technically prepare specifications for the MDT system. The environment for the bidding was good. We only had 2 bidders, interestingly enough, but the cost, the consultant was very happy that probably came in 10 to 20% under what normal costs would have been outside the economy that we're currently in. Delta Wireless and Network Solutions was the lowest bidder. They provided a bid for both Task 1 and 2. The second bidder only provided an RFP submittal for one of those 2 tasks. So when we convened a working group that's composed of not only the Sheriff's Office but Tech Services to evaluate the bids, it seemed to make sense. We would save more money issuing a bid award to one contractor to manage both projects than to 2 separate contractors because of the construction and installation schedules. Project 2, the cost for the software is $624,000. In terms of financing, you'll see we have several grants. First is the PSIC. You'll remember you executed a board resolution about 18 months ago when we applied for that grant. That's the Public Safety Interoperability Communications Grant Program. Long words. We competed against about 3,000 or 4,000 public agencies in the country. We were one of 6 counties in the region in California, Northern California, to receive funding. The second was COPS Technology Grant Program. You don't see that on this sheet. That will fund subsequent phases. That was awarded at $350,000 from congressional staff on an earmark. The third grant is the 08 Homeland Security Grant Program that we included a $34,000 expenditure to purchase software. And then lastly was AB 443, the Local Public Safety Fund. You'll remember that's funding coming from the state to rural sheriff's offices. That represents the accumulation of several years' worth of setting aside funding for long-term communications build-out. And because of that, we're in the position now that we can leverage local funds to match to state funds to fund the project. And then lastly, I've showed a project map, and you'll see there's 3 towers. They form a V. In terms of coverage, this will basically cover from the airport west on 49 to the county line. It'll go to probably as far up as McCallamy Hill. It will not cover Copperopolis, and it will cover just below Murphy's on this first phase. Subsequent phases would require additional towers. We have several grant applications out and congressional earmarks that we're waiting to hear from. And as we get funding, we'll progressively build the system out to expand the geographic coverage of the system. Any questions?
Any questions?
Ross Drive is the new tower that was erected.
Ross Drive was, that's right, Ross Drive was covered on a congressional earmark that we applied for Homeland Security grant funds and also COPS technology funds 4 years ago. That will be a site that will also support the system. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have just a couple, and I want to start off by saying this represents a lot of work on your part. Congratulations. It's really quite well organized. But on the way that these sales quotes are organized and kind of reading the verbiage that's in the scope of the work, could you explain to me why it is that there is one portion of the sales quote that's $9,000 for design, and then the other scope of work says specifically that we're not providing design? That seems contradictory. But
the $9,000 invoice is IP MobileNet, which is the main operating system that sits on the tower that'll talk to RIMS. That $9,000 expenditure is a consulting cost from IP MobileNet to work with our network engineers to marry the two into our system. Delta is not engineering any other engineering feature of the project.
Okay, and then there's this odd thing about let's see, I can't really find where it says, but they're specifically say that it's not warranted. The equipment or the labor isn't warranted past the point that you accept the system.
No, and part of our contract with Delta, which you should have in front of you, I hope. County Council had helped us prepare a contract that does a couple things. One, it prescribes that we have warranties on the equipment from the manufacturer specification, which in this case is 3 years on the Motorola equipment in the car and 2 years for the IP MobileNet equipment on the towers and also in the car. Second, the installation contractor, Delta Wireless, will warranty their work for their installation work for 1 year.
The contract specifically rejects the boilerplate that came with the quote and substitutes the contract for that boilerplate, and Delta's agreed to that provision. So,
now, what we did, Mr. Thomas, was we included not the invoices, the quotes, so that you could see them.
Yes.
But they will no longer be quotes. If you award the bid, then they'll be.
Quite some time ago, Tom Tryon getting really upset because the city was getting more than its 10% fair share or whatever of funds, and that was because the county did not submit projects. So the fault was ours. And in this case, I feel that by default, the COG's taken over projects. So, and I want to just like give an example of TE fund, Transportation Enhancement Funds. We've had on the overall work program for the council, Cosgrove Creek bicycle path. Now, let's just take that. If we want to do Michelson, then we might have to tell 2 supervisors on this board that the Cosgrove Creek, because there's a lot of money, is not a priority. And
It's prescribed in the contract of 3 progressive billings based on the work being completed.
Okay. The other thing that caught my eye is that these computer terminals, I guess you'd call them, in the cars are based on a Microsoft Vista working system. And
No. The manufacturer bid Vista, but as part of our implementation, Tech Services, who's been consulting in the project from day one with us, we're not going to operate on the Vista platform.
Okay, that was my concern, because
Yes.
I've heard of problems with that. Well, I can't find anything wrong with it. So.
Wonderful. I want to thank tremendously Howard Stolman and his staff. They have just put in gobs and gobs and gobs of work, as well as several agencies around us and in the valley who helped us with our specifications. So, Howard, thank you.
Okay, and just one final thing, can you touch a little bit on that, the bid, the bid bond, that 2.5% bid bond, what is that doing for you?
Yes. What that's doing is, much like construction projects, we're going to bond the entire amount, the entire $552,000, to make sure that, and this was a good suggestion on council's part, that because of the economy, we just want to provide another level of protection. We're very familiar with Delta Wireless. They're the county's radio maintenance contractor currently for the sheriff's office operation and have been for several years. So their solvency and their competency is well recognized, but we thought that this was very important to protect the county as well.
Okay, and lastly, with so much of the communication, like the cable system isn't the right word, but the systems that use satellites, I'm just a little surprised that we're using what I would think is, microwave is pretty old technology, but why didn't we seek
This was
satellite?
months and months of research just against that question. In fact, we piloted the use of satellite radios in 2 patrol cars, the search and rescue team, and our bomb squad and hazmat team.
Supervisors saying Cosgrove Creek, as well as the community down there, saying that that is a priority, that needs to stay. And we've rolled that project because we're hoping, we think it's a good project. Now, are we going to compete that, and I don't remember all the TE projects.
Yes,
but
that
that's
is
a
one of the
good
projects.
But that is a good example of a project that we've been rolling because the community wanted it, the supervisors want it. So that's kind of where we are, and so as a COG representative, I haven't had anything else before me, and I'm saying, yes, I support that. And now we have another one. Another project is the train, is the Shea up at the Logging Museum. We are almost complete with all the work that has to be accomplished going through the State Historic Society, Caltrans. It's almost a wrap. Are we now going to say, oops, we can't do it because the Board of Supervisors now wants to do Michelson? I mean, and my daughter went to Michelson, so I mean, I have this loyalty, but and I think what Mr. Garcia has done on behalf of the county is very appropriate. I'm just saying, as a COG member, the county wasn't there. So these projects came before us, and as a COG member, we had the funding and we allocated it to them. So,
Indeed,
yes,
yeah.
you're biting at the bit, Mr. Garcia.
I am. The county's aware of the projects that have been obligated through Caltrans for funding through the T program, and we understand that those are not available for any of the projects that we would hope to submit to the board. One of those is Shea Locomotive. That is obligated. That's through Caltrans. That funding for T is now off the table for anyone else to use. Others, like Cosgrove Creek, have not been obligated. There are several on the list that the COG has that have not been through obligation. And if the county wants to reassess the needs for the T funding, now's the time to do it before those funds are obligated and they become locked up. And again, we're hoping that the county representatives to the COG board can work with the county board and identify which projects are priorities to the county from both the COG and the county list. If we go with Mitchell, Cosgrove Creek will come off. One in Angels will come off. But again, these are priorities that need to be established by both the board and the council.
Well, Tom, is there not supposed to be a priority within this funding for the safe routes to schools? And, you know, if you want to look at safe routes to schools, the school that's most at risk, the children of a school that's most at risk, quite frankly, is Michelson, where the little kids have to walk across Highway 4. And, you know, I pointed this out to the COG board. I get absolutely no support whatsoever on the COG board to include this project. I hammered on earlier public works directors, and as Marita said, we didn't even submit anything, which was, about as pathetic as it gets. And now we have it on here. But does not the safe route to schools have the priority?
We're making a recommendation, and we're hoping to get guidance from the board on what the priorities you establish are. Safe routes to schools certainly.
On this route, we have both Feeney Park, which in the summer is lots of little children, and we have Michelson School. And everybody crosses, basically is crossing, or many are crossing Highway 4. It seems to me that, it's always seemed to me that from a safety point of view, that should be the highest priority, is to get a walkover of Highway 4. And for some reason, I get, until you showed up, I get no response from anybody.
And again, that's why we're here, so that we can identify the projects that are out there.
To go. And we could not get reception at all. Worse than the current low-band voice reception. Working with a consultant that we're using out of San Francisco, who is also the engineering consultant for the 5 other counties that were awarded, including Sacramento, Yolo, Stanislaus, San Joaquin, and Placer. Their conclusion was the federal government wants to build out microwave systems, bulletproof, proprietary frequency microwave system. This is not a cellular system. This is a proprietary 450 megahertz frequency. That'll belong to the county, owned by the county, maintained by the county. So we won't have that problem when you have emergencies with cellular. Everybody starts dialing cellular phones and you get a busy signal and can't get through. This is based on a proprietary 450 megahertz system. Much more expensive, more costly to maintain, but in the long run will have greater uptime, and it's more reliable.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Any questions from the audience? Oh, sure.
Clay, I thought I heard you say what the, when you talked about what the system will do, about community reporting.
Correct.
Is that, there was a burglary at my house,
Yes.
can fill the form out on the county website?
Conceptually, yes. Functionally, we have to determine which types of reports, types of crimes, types of information we would want to use through a web link, and which types of incidents we would send a deputy to.
So what did you mean then when you said community? Were you talking about this will encompass it at some point?
You would be able to do exactly what you said. You could type in through a web link to the sheriff's office, report a crime, report an incident, report some circumstance. We just have to work out what types of crimes or incidents do you want to take from a web link, and which ones are we going to send a deputy to?
Working in their office now as a business analyst, so definitely there's a link. CalWorks is another one. As we transition to C4 and data becomes more available, that's another application where we could start to really track and cross-reference clients and services through GIS. So Public Works, another one. Public Works has been a GIS user for several years, and as they start to really implement their pavement management system, GIS is a critical component of that, as well as the Planning Department. Planning Department, as you well know, is using GIS in their general plan update. As they continue to address more and more of the county issues with GIS, the likelihood is that they will, of course, need additional user licenses as well, so that would cover anything for them as well. Other questions?
Okay, any other questions? Okay, Chair entertains a motion.
I move this item.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Howard.
Thank you.
Okay, Howard is still standing for 16. This is a discussion and possible action regarding a resolution authorizing a contract with Dell Software and Peripherals in the amount of $81,459.78 for renewal of the enterprise software agreement for the use of certain Microsoft products from December 31, 2009 through December 31, 2013. So this is also brought to us by Mr. Stolman.
Thank you. What's before you is essentially an extension of our existing Microsoft contract. We've been under an enterprise agreement with Microsoft will be our third round if you approve this today. Riverside County took the lead through our statewide association of IT directors several years ago to negotiate with Microsoft. They actually led a public RFP process and awarded bids to some Microsoft large account resellers so that we could use the Microsoft suite of applications for a reduced price. Calaveras County has a significantly lower number of users than other counties, and so we were never able to achieve any kind of economies of scale for discounted pricing. Under the Microsoft agreement, the Riverside agreement now, I believe the latest count is somewhere between 300,000 and 400,000 desktops are on that contract, so we're receiving the same price as 300,000 desktops would bring. So it is an advantage to the county to use the Riverside contract, and this is essentially our third extension into that contract. This contract will go another 5 years. It does obligate the county to an $81,459.78 expense for the next 5 years. That is an anticipated cost in TSD's budget, has been for years, and the amount we're seeking is included in the budget already. Questions?
I just want to make sure that you're stating that so everybody understands that it is $81,000 annually.
Annually,
for 5
correct.
years. Yeah, okay.
400 and where's my number? Anyway,
$7,298.90.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions on this?
Also moved, Mr. Chair, the resolution as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded for approval. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Howard.
thank you.
Okay, we have item 17. This is review of correspondence, reports, and various matters of concern. I'd like to start this morning with Supervisor Callaway.
Last night I had Ebbets Pass National Scenic Byway meeting. And on Monday, Steve and I, Terry Woodrow, Supervisor Alpine County, will be meeting with the Forest Service regarding the off-road vehicle program. And at the Forest Service signs, it'll be a conference call with the ranger from, what's Susan's last name, Steve?
Sikalski. Sikalski.
With Susan. Russ and I were at the CSAC conference last week. The state controller was there, and it was announced that there's a likelihood at the end of this budget year the state will be $35 billion in the hole. There was total silence in the room because all of us know what we went through this past year.
How did we go from 10 to 35? I mean, the estimate that last I heard coming out of the state was 10.
No,
RCRC
now
was
at
saying
21.
figure 15, and now we're at 35?
That's proposed for the end of the year. It's now at about, I think they said 21 billion. RCRC was there, Patricia was there.
But that was a
Did that assume
$6 billion for the rest of
That's-
this year and 14.4 for the beginning of next year.
No, going
That was the
into
21.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the 21, was 6.6 shortfall for the remainder of this year, and then 14.4 beginning next year, for a total of 21, the last I heard. 35.
Well, the way that it was presented is it was 21, and if nothing is done about that, and by the following year, it will be a cumulative 35 billion.
Does that assume the health reform bill that came out of the House of Representatives is passed, or is that not
No,
assumed
that was
yet?
not part of the package.
Because if that were passed, which I don't think it will be, that would, the last data I heard, which was 2 or 3 days ago, one analyst was saying that would add $10 billion a year as a base.
To California?
To California for, what do I want to say, Medicaid, Medi-Cal, no, Medicaid, I think. And then it would go up every year from that.
Well, I
So-
guess what we're saying is I think.
So he's
that
saying
the-
this is his best estimate. He thinks this is going to happen.
Yes, that's.
This 35.
So what I'm thinking, my recommendation is that our CAOs start planning now for strategies for what we're going to do for the budget, and I'm sure she'll have her ear to the floor of Sacramento and how that's going to impact cities and counties.
Marita, going back to how that was calculated, how much of it is a deficit that it will be there at the end of this fiscal year, and how much of it is the deficit for next fiscal year?
I understood it, and might not have heard it, I understood it as the going into next fiscal year.
I mean, this year's budget cannot have a $35 billion deficit.
Going into next year's, going into 010,
Well, 010,
end of 10 and 11 budget year.
okay, how much of that's made up from the deficit of 09-10, and how much of it's the deficit that?
Going into,
10
I
and
don't
11?
know.
Okay.
I don't know. We're going to hear figures
Oh, yeah.
floating, and they'll probably change weekly.
Yeah, my understanding is the 21 million has to do with the
Billion.
fact that some of the budget proposals that were adopted that were intended to save money are not being realized, and therefore we have issues with the current year budget not going to be balanced based on the assumptions that were made.
You know,
And so unless they take some action now, the bleeding is going to get worse and could easily end up to 35.
And an example they happen to use on the radio, so we're all listening to it, was in the corrections department, they issued 5,000 intents to lay off. What the Board of Corrections did was, or corrections say, we've saved 13,000 jobs, and that wasn't a true analysis. I was furious. I felt like I was watching a Sacramento shell game. The reality was, it's because of their funding, the 5,000 people didn't have to be laid off. It wasn't 13,000. What they were saying, it was 13,000 in proposed savings if they didn't get money. I mean, I was just blown away by what I was hearing. It was totally unacceptable at how unethical that was. I mean, and that's just one department. And I think it's important that for department heads, to the board and to the public, that we're real clear on the numbers and not, I guess I'm just getting.
Or a combination of the two.
And that's, will be part of this
Part of
at
this.
some point, okay.
So can
Thank
you imagine the productivity, the information we get from the community during live incidents, fires, floods? It's going to be a huge boost in operations and it'll long-term save costs.
Thank you.
Supervisor Lonsky?
I'm curious what the expected life of the system is and what the kind of maintenance costs to keep it up might be anticipated.
30 years life is the projected maintenance on microwave, and the maintenance will be about $65,000 a year, which is not disproportionate to the current system that we're presently using.
So it fits within current budget.
Close. Naturally, we're adding a whole lot more hardware that we don't have now. But I think the economics are there, that way it's much more feasible.
Okay, My final question, Clay, is in regard to the map that you have that shows.
When I hear how departments in Sacramento manipulate the information that's so critical to the citizens of California. Anyway, she's going to work on that.
We have to be prepared for continued uncertainty, absolutely.
Continued uncertainty, I like that.
Because the reality is there's a lot of lawsuits that are challenging
Yes.
the budget proposals that were enacted, which then, if in fact the lawsuits win, the state does not then reap the benefit that they had intended as part of the budget proposal solution, so therefore it all rolls downhill and it likely will impact us to the negative.
Well, this was a house of cards in the first place, and a gentle breeze of any litigation or truth will collapse it, and that's pretty much where we're at. I'm embarrassed to be associated with the state process at this point. I think it's shown that we need to change the way we do budgets in California.
Yeah, that's the first time I heard 35. I was back on the 21. I heard the 21.
Anyway, we're just starting the games. The other thing that, excuse me, we heard, and I'm sure you've heard it in RCRC, and we've read about it in the newspapers, but the possible constitutional convention and what that looks like, and there are 4, which I will have Carol route to all of you, 4 proposals, and it'll be interesting to see the Secretary of State's working on, Secretary of State, the ballot measures, what they will say. What is it that you call them when, on how they'll be worded on the ballot. And then we'll see how many get certified and get signatures to go on the ballot. But I'll send you a list of, it's just a real easy matrix to understand who's involved and what it is that they're supporting. That's all.
Did you want to mention that session that we attended about AB 811?
Oh, we attended a session on green building. And Sonoma County has, and I've already talked with and contacted him, they have an auditor, controller, treasurer, tax collector. It's one position.
What county?
What county? Sonoma.
Sonoma.
And there are a couple of other counties too, because I asked how that came about, but that's a discussion for another day. And talked about AB 811. I've talked to several of the builders up in Ebbets Pass area about it, and it does involve the counties, or counties, city or counties, putting forward money for retrofitting on homes and businesses for energy conservation. It is paid back through property tax, through an assessment. It's all voluntary. He also said that, Mr. Doyle was his name, said that you need an economy of scale, which means it might be difficult for Calaveras to do it, but in cooperation with Tuolumne Amador, we might be able to put something together. So I'm getting all the documents, legal documents, how it works, how the funding works, and see if we can put something together. He said the program has been successful beyond their expectations. And it's generally a 20-year payback, principal plus interest, and they're going to the bond market to sell the bonds for the money that they have lent, in essence, up-fronted. And so the question is, how do you possibly get the seed money to do the program?
What prioritization does that loan have? I mean, if somebody comes in and wants to...
He said right off, it's just like your school bonds, like any other, your school bonds, your fire district bond.
You mean everybody's paying it, or just the people that own the houses?
No, just the people who participate. So if you retrofit your home and you want to put a solar system in, it costs you $20,000, and you don't want to pay it up front, you can put it on your property tax bill, and when you pay your property tax, you pay it over a 20-year period.
And you don't have to get a subordination from the first trust deed holder or something like that?
No, it's just an assessment. You do a benefit assessment.
Essentially, Tom, what it does is it allows the county to make a decision to invest some portion of their what they called excess funds or reserve funds, and make an investment within the county, which the way they were describing it is very, very secure, in that if there were to be a default on the first deed of trust on the property, as you know, tax liens are superior to all those other things, so they get paid first. So there's really no risk. There's virtually none.
I'm surprised on something like that isn't being paid by everybody.
No.
It's basically
It's only those people who utilize the program.
I'm surprised that the first trust deed holder doesn't have something to say about that.
Well, I'm getting all the documents. I'm going to make you a believer, Mr. Tryon.
The mechanism has been in place for 7 months, and the graph that they have on their increases in investments or increase in people who are taking advantage of it is almost a vertical line. It's $37 million that they've put out, or they have applications for $37 million, and it's something that they give to the homeowner. The homeowner hires a contractor. The county isn't involved in dispersing funds to the contractors or anything. It's been very successful. And the logic that they are using there is that they wouldn't approve a loan for somebody to do $15,000 worth of solar panels on their house unless they had, first of all, made their house tight, and double pane windows and those kinds of things. They start with the lowest hanging fruit. So. And I kind of got the impression that it might be something that would be usable, that there was a mention of water in their program. So what kind of jogged my thought processes was the 62 properties in Rancho Calaveras that need to spend a lot of money to get infrastructure, and I think it's conceivable that this program could be used for that as well. Anyway, it's worth looking. I'm glad that you're going to put that together for us.
So the lump sum of the loan is given to the property owner prior to the work being done?
No.
So the work is done, and then the lump sum is given to the property owner to disperse to the contractor?
Yeah.
So the proof of the work being done is
what
the invoices.
And they have criteria. I mean, their mortgage has to be kept current.
Oh, yeah. No delinquent taxes.
There's criteria for people to participate in the program, and they have businesses that participate too.
Mm-hmm.
The assessment goes with the land, not with the person, just like any assessment on your property tax, your property bill now.
They said that it was particularly attractive to senior citizens that are living in a house. They would like to immediately have the benefits of the lower energy costs, but didn't necessarily want to live in the house for 20 years. They wanted to take advantage of the lower costs for 5 years, but once putting their houses on the market, the new buyer would continue to pay the county back.
And so the assessment pays back that loan over 20 years at whatever the municipal interest rate is, like 2% or whatever?
It's whatever it was when the bonds were sold.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, no, the way that I understood it is that the program, you would go into the program as a property owner, signing a repayment agreement that you're paying the county 7% interest on, and agreeing that it would be taken out of your just a bill that would be sent to you twice a year to amortize that proportion of the indebtedness, twice a year. And it's costing the there is a spread. I mean, what they're paying themselves is what was it, Marita, 4%? That The idea was that they would be able to sell these investments or sell these loans to an investment company like Wells Fargo or whatever, would come in and buy them, and at 6%, and the county would still continue to get a 1% for doing the paperwork.
Well, right, I
administration.
mean, obviously, somebody's going to have to come in and present it.
Yeah, and this gentleman's name is Rod Doyle. He said that he would be happy to come in and give us a personal presentation on it.
Well, I was at a meeting yesterday, a committee meeting, that this AB 811 came up, and there were some questions as to whether you could put stipulations on to the money as far as having to use local contractors or find local supplies or so forth.
Well,
Was
that could be,
right?
no, they do not want to get between the homeowner or business and whoever they hire. They say that's between the homeowner and whoever they hire. All they're doing is, in essence, fronting the money for whatever the work is that's done, and then it's put on their tax bill. But they didn't want to they discussed it when they formed it, but they didn't want to get into managing the project. So, I mean, if we wanted to say that you have to use a local contractor, I mean, I guess that's something we could consider, but Sonoma said we do not want to be involved in that.
That inverted V is, and you talked about the coverage area, it wouldn't include Copperopolis. It's pretty obvious that because of terrain, you wouldn't get any usefulness from this up country. But I guess it goes without saying that the patrol cars will have a redundant or a duplicate system. I mean, what you currently are using from ridgetop to ridgetop, and so. And when these cars are in certain parts of the county, this system clearly won't be of any benefit or usefulness until we get more towers.
That's correct. Okay. That's correct.
And
however, I do want to add, this project is largely federal funded and only requires, and specifically requires a very narrow scope of type of equipment we can fund, and that is microwave. What we want to look at is a future phase that will look at mobile routers in the car that will use cell. So we'd have
between you and whoever you get.
So there wasn't even any restrictions on competitive bidding for that money?
It's up
they
to
got
you.
3 bids or 1 bid or whatever, and they took the highest bid.
That's
up to
because
them.
you're paying it back. You're putting it on your tax bill.
there was some discussion about how the installers, contractors in the area had ramped up for it. $37 million worth of work suddenly dropping in their lap in 7 months. And significant. Okay, are you concluded with your report? Supervisor Toffenelli.
I have nothing to report for this week. Thursday, I'll be eating turkey.
Well, I was waiting for you to say something about that.
That's my report.
Okay. Supervisor Walensky.
I have a few things. I will be on this coming Monday at the U.S. Forest Service meeting on the access and offload stuff. I wanted to talk briefly about the following week because there's I have some serious conflicts on big issues. I have to go down to Kernville for the 2nd and 3rd for the Sierra Nevada Conservancy Board meeting. But we also have the 4:30 meeting at Calaveras High School Library on the FEMA flood stuff. I'm hoping, okay, as long as there's
I'll be there as
some people there, that's great. I have a couple of quick things to report. The testimony yesterday before the House Natural Resources Committee or Subcommittee on Mining went well, and the discussions afterwards, it was made known to me that there were people looking for areas that had many abandoned mines, and Calaveras County has in the neighborhood close to 3,000 of these. And we have been building over and around and in the midst of them, and we have one town actually on the significant minor, that's Copperopolis. So there were suggestions that we might make known our desire to have some remediation, and that there were funds out there that we could express an interest to that we hadn't applied for. So our planning director will receive today a 14-page outline of a proposal that people are willing to write for us. And all we need to do right now is express an interest. Same, Jeannie's office will receive that, as will Brian Moss. And my hope is that we can get together with the people that are suggesting this sometime next week, or possibly as early as the week after. The 7th was proposed for the meeting, and people were willing to come to town to discuss this with us. This is money already in the state budget, and it would need some considerable work to get it moved our direction. It would take more than just one entity, so Angels Camp and Amador County were suggested as possible partners in this. I will try to copy everybody my written testimony, which was submitted too late to get the copies here to you, but I'll get it to you electronically. Secondly, I would like to see whether we might consider, because the senior center is experiencing some significant economic stresses, I would like to take a look at different ways that we might find them the traditional $5,000 that we have been contributing to, $6,000, excuse me, that has contributed to meeting that shortfall in their standard funding. And there might be several different ways we could do this, but I'm hoping that we might agendize this before they have a more severe crisis than they're already experiencing. And finally, I wanted to mention that once again, we've been through a couple of rounds of this. There is a proposal, or there's consideration being discussed at the Calaveras County School District that they would close Railroad Flat Elementary. Now, this is the elementary school that is the only school in the county or in the region that won a Blue Ribbon Award. It is a school that the teachers agreed to, because it was per capita, there was greater spending because it was a small school. The teachers agreed to operate without a principal over the last year and have done a fine job of managing it. This is a school that has 86% school lunch subsidy, so it's at risk financially, at-risk kids, and they are achieving far beyond the state average, or for that matter, the local average for people in that economic circumstance. And the idea here would be somehow that the school, and the total amount that the school says that it will be saved is $200,000 a year to close this. But my question on this is, what's the price of a town? You close the school, and the businesses that rely on that school right across the way are severely threatened, including the last cafe in town and the general store. These kids matter. They are getting excellent community support. They are achieving way beyond anybody's expectations. And the idea of shipping them out to two or three different schools where they will not have the community support and attention puts their future at greater risk than they already experience. So in my view, the idea that the shortfall, the school shortfall, would be borne entirely in one community, already the most economically stressed community in this county, is a little bit inequitable, to say the least. So I wanted to say that publicly, but the community will rise to the defense of its school, and my hope is that there will be support from other communities as well in our effort to see whether we can come up with $200,000. And in fact, the costs of the shutdown are not yet factored in, so really it's closer to 150,000 that would be saved. My hope would be that we can distribute this more evenly across all areas of the county and that one community not be made to suffer this most devastating blow. And that's my report for today. By the way, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I hope it's a good weekend, and we celebrate it with the joy and thanks that belongs here in Calaveras County. It's a great place to live, much to be thankful for, that previous report notwithstanding.
I thought we were going to give joy and thanks for those that were having roast beef for Thanksgiving.
Well, that too.
I just wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and that completes my report.
Okay. I want to acknowledge that I had I think, a productive time at the CSAC meeting. Especially excited about that AB 811 report. We have a new president of CSAC, a gentleman, Tony Oliveira is his name. He's a kind of an interesting gentleman. He, in addition to being a county supervisor, he also serves on the PERS board. He has a band. As a matter of fact, his band provided the entertainment for the installation dinner. And hearing everything that he does, he was saying that performance was the 150th performance for his band in 2009. So I'm wondering, I've got to follow. I got to follow this guy around and find out how he manages his time management. But I appreciate the fact that he's really an excellent musician and kind of a deep thinker. He's like you, Tom. He has a background in finance. I don't know. He's just a pretty remarkable guy. Okay. I also want to remind anybody who is listening and is concerned about the FEMA maps. That meeting, it's a kind of a two-part meeting. There's one session that starts at 4:30, another session that, excuse me? Oh, it just goes from 4:30 to 6?
Sorry.
Well, it's the same
meeting.
Yeah, the same information repeated twice, but if you can't make it there at 4:30, I think that they're going to also present the materials again at 6.
It's the same information.
Speak up. What are you saying?
Okay, I apparently have it wrong. 2:30 to 4:30, and then 4:30 to 6? Okay.
And what date?
That is Wednesday, the 2nd. I would also like to make people aware on the board and elsewhere that the recreation management plan, as developed by the Bureau of Reclamation for New Melones Reservoir, will be presented at the visitors facility, and that's there's a kind of a scenic overlook area over there on New Melones on the Tuolumne side. And that is going to occur on the same day, but that's, I think it starts at 9 and goes until 1. I will be there to talk with them more about the
50 and a redundant cell, so it wouldn't make any difference where you are in the county.
concept of expanding recreational uses on the west side of New Melones. Okay. I think that's, aside from acknowledging again, like everybody, that Thursday is Thanksgiving, and looking forward to getting together with my family, and I hope you all enjoy the day. It's our custom here to ask the CAO if you have anything to report.
I have nothing to report other than thank you for the opportunity to join you as a staff and to serve the community, and I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving.
Mr. Jones?
Nothing here.
Okay.
Is that a roast beef Thanksgiving or a turkey Thanksgiving?
Turkey.
Okay, we do have a closed session scheduled after this. I did want to make a comment, Ginny, that our technician over here, Jason, occasionally makes comments that our words will be heard a lot more clearly and effectively if we speak into the microphone. So that's why I kind of act like a... Oh, well, maybe I'm too
He's
loud.
pretty decked out today. Have you seen it? Normally, he's got a tie and a shirt.
Tie? Oh, okay.
I noticed.
All right. All right, so that concludes the public portion of this meeting today. Thank everyone for coming, and appreciate it.
You can move on
Okay.
an automatic voter. Long-term, not part of this project.
Okay. Supervisor Toffanelli and I have several instances during the last couple of, or a month or so, we've run into a gentleman named Ben Hewlett with Motherlode Internet, and they have what is it, $4 million in a grant that they got to expand their capabilities here in the region and in the county. We've suggested to him that he contact the Sheriff's Department so that you're aware of what their plans are, so that there could be some economies of scale if they're going to build some towers that are appropriately located for you guys. He seemed to be very willing to enter into those discussions with you to see if he could help or vice versa. So.
Yes, in fact, Howard had coordinated the first round of ERA coordination with the cellular companies. They formed a joint venture. We were hoping to have a new tower constructed upcountry, Arnold area, somewhere higher, and that we could co-locate MDT, high band, low band, EMS, MedNet. And that application subsequently failed. But there is round two, and Howard's helping us to coordinate that now.
Very good.
We need more towers, and we just don't have infrastructure, and that's the problem. Kind of taking baby steps here.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? Anybody want to jump in with a motion?
I'll move item 13 and 14, the resolutions approving the purchase of the RIMS CAD software and approving the award of the contract to Delta Wireless.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? You have a unanimous approval. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now looking at item 15. This is a discussion and possible action regarding the resolution authorizing the Chief Information Officer to enter into a 3-year agreement with ESRI for expanded use of the GIS software. This was continued from our 11/3 meeting. Morning, Howard.
Good morning.
Still morning.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I just wanted, before I talk about this item, I wanted to just also thank the Sheriff's Department. As Clay alluded, Tech Services staff has spent a lot of time working with the Sheriff's Office, but the real accomplishment is that the two departments started early on in this process working together. So I want to commend the Sheriff's Department for bringing in our help along with their consultants, and all of us have been partnering together since the beginning of this project. So it's a fantastic effort by the county to work together and bring this to you. The county has used ESRI's GIS software for a number of years. As Clay mentioned, part of the new system allows that the GIS is available now to the deputies in the car. What that does is require some additional user licenses on the ESRI side. So when we started looking at the cost for those licenses, it quickly became apparent that we could enter into an enterprise agreement with ESRI And the sheriff, once they saw the cost for the individual licenses was very comparable to the enterprise license, the sheriff, in the spirit of cooperation, agreed to fund the difference that we pay ESRI for the enterprise license. So what that boils down to is tech services, the GIS budget will continue to pay the ESRI share of maintenance that we do now. The additional cost for the 3-year enterprise license will be borne by the Sheriff's Department for the duration of that agreement as part of this project. What that does for the county as an enterprise license is it opens up those applications to all of the county users. So it's not just the Sheriff's Department. So, for example, a public health had a new request for GIS that was going to require additional user licenses for an application that they're running as part of an immunization clinic or an outbreak tracking or whatever it is. That enterprise license now stands in their place as well, so they don't need to go back to ESRI and purchase individual licenses. It will be covered. So for the sum for the enterprise license that the sheriff is paying the balance for, the rest of the county stands to benefit. So again, this is a win-win situation, and I just want to thank the sheriff's office for helping us out. Happy to entertain any questions.
No, I think this is a great win for the county. Just curious though, Howard, I mean, do many of the departments utilize this, or you see them utilizing this service?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, public health is one. Actually, one of my old GIS staff is